Hello, it's your friend Doublebite. Sorry if I'm speaking a little quietly in this video. I'm gonna try to bump it in post, but Burb is sleeping upstairs and I don't want to disturb them. And I'm sorry if I'm looking that way a lot. It's just that I have some notes on the screen because I'm actually like prepared. Right? Weird. Anyway, so I've been thinking a lot about game design lately. Obviously, still thinking about PAX things, and I also finally played Ticket to Ride for the first time. Now I can see what the hype is about. It's a great gateway game, far better than Settlers of Catan, and it gave me a lot of inspiration. And while I was thinking about making this video and thinking about like what I wanted to say, I finished reading Mike Seliger's A Kobold's Guide to Game Design, and there's a section by Dave Howell, who wrote didn't write, but created the Golden Guidelines of Game Design, which is frustratingly not available in print yet. Hopefully I'll see it someday in a presentation, and there's some excerpts, some bits of it in Kobold's Guide. Again, highly recommend, please check it out. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my experience with Ticket to Ride and why it's better than Catan, and how this ties in with some of what I've been thinking about with regards to frustration in games, as inspired by Mike Seliger's talk at PAX Unplugged, and also about cooperative games, since they're one of the genres I play the most often. So let's do a little recap. Mike's talk at PAX was about frustration, how players need to be frustrated to the point where they almost give up, and then don't. And they need to feel some kind of satisfaction. And he talked about some anti-frustration, like frustration stress valves, such as comeback mechanics, headwind, so that the player in the lead slows down the amount that they're winning by over time, which is also a thing that Dave Howell talks about. So the idea of just frustration as a part of fun. And then the kind of secondary sources I'm thinking of that were from the Kobold's Guide. One was in the excerpt "Let's Make It Interesting, Designing Gambling Games" by James Ernst, where he states that it does not matter who wins. And now he's talking about gambling games, which are more of a binary excitement, disappointment, but the excitement highs beat the disappointment lows. That's where the fun comes in for people who like gambling. The other bit, which is almost directly what I wanted to talk about in the first place, and I've been thinking about it, and then I finished reading the book, and it's like, oh, someone smarter than me thought of this too. It's from the section "Stealing the Fun" by Dave Howell, and he provides a couple of axioms. A game is not fun unless a player believes they have some chance to win until the game ends, even if it's a tiny remote chance. Corollary: a game is not fun unless a player believes they have a chance of winning, and a game is not fun unless the player believes they have a chance of losing until the game ends. And this varies a lot, but it's a pretty good rule of thumb. And one guideline mentioned specifically that I want to touch on was his "don't force a reverse, don't make players go backwards." Sorry. And we'll touch on that a bit later. So why am I talking about this? Well, as many of you know, I hate Settlers of Catan. And I'll confess, it was my first designer board game. I loved it. Kids in college were at a party, passing around the Catan, gotta take a hit. And it was really good. And I played it a lot. I got it for my parents, and that got me into board games. Probably next up was followed by Carcassonne, and I played Betrayal and House on the Hill in college, and that's become a favorite. But over time, I've started to really dislike Catan. And some of it I think is fair, and some of it I think is maybe unfair, because I always do the same strategy. Because I find that strategy to be the least frustrating. And I'll get to why in a second. Least bad frustrating. So, Dave Howell talked about games being fun with respect to their ending, but I want to talk about games being fun with respect to their middle. And that's kind of where the concept of "it does not matter who wins." Playing Ticket to Ride. A background. I play games with my parents a lot, and my dad is very competitive. He loves to win. But more importantly, he doesn't like to lose. We rarely play Carcassonne anymore because he will try. So in Carcassonne, you can place units to get points throughout the game, or you can place meeples sideways, face down, to farm. And at the end of the game, they'll score based on the number of cities in their farm, roughly speaking. A farm is a connected route of grass, and you can't play units in the same group of grass where there's already a farm. Right? If there's someone in this farm, no one else can go in that farm. However, Carcassonne, you're building the board with tiles. So if you have a tile with a farm piece, and it's not attached to an existing farm piece, you can then later connect them. So I have a farmer, my dad connects a farmer later, we're 1-1, we both get the points. If later one of us connects another piece and sneaks another farmer in there, whoever has more will get all the points. So it frequently boils down to, at the end of the game, we both try to screw each other with farmers, which can be fun. But when he's been working the whole game for this goal, and in the last second loses, doesn't have fun with that. He has a lot of fun when he does beat me out, but he hates when I sneak in the last second. In Ticket to Ride, my mom won a couple games. I think 2 in a row, which is, my mom's good at games, but she definitely wins the third most often out of the 3 of us. She won 2 Ticket to Rides, and he wasn't frustrated, he was excited. So the core of what I want to talk about, and the idea I want to be capturing here, is the idea of making progress throughout a game. I am someone who needs a feeling of progress throughout a game. After the very first game of Ticket to Ride we played, so backstory on Ticket to Ride, you can do one of 3 things on a turn. Get more gold cards, draw colored train cards, or use colored train cards to place a train. And you place a train basically by having a set of certain colors and you place on a certain place on the map. You only do one of those actions. After the very first game, I house ruled it so that you could do 2 of those actions. Now, in some ways, if you're experienced at this game, it would make the game kind of broken. Because part of the game on a bigger term strategy is blocking other players, playing where they want to play, which you can predict sort of by what colors they're picking when you can see what colors they pick. By being able to pick them play, it removes some of that tension. Here's why we did it. First of all, my parents and I grew up on rummy games, where you tend to, use a regular deck of cards and either play down sets or play down runs of cards, or sequences like 5, 6, 7, 8. You pick a card, and then if you can play, you do play. So to play a game where you're making sets of something, but you couldn't play right away, was driving us all nuts. It's just so opposite to how we think about games like that, just because of our rummy background. But the other reason is you would get the set, and it'd be exciting, and then you'd have delayed satisfaction. There's in fact a chance that someone else could take that satisfaction away, take that victory away from you. Whereas if you picked it and then you got it and then you could play it, you get that instant gratification. A tangent, which I'll bring back to, is I watched all of She-Ra recently, a couple weeks ago, which I really should make a video about. She-Ra is 13 episodes long, and my biggest criticism of it was that it wasn't longer. Not as a form of praise, but literally, each episode took place in a different kingdom that were interesting and cool. But you never got to see the journey between kingdoms, and that's one of the best things about Avatar: The Last Airbender, is you get to see the journey between places. So when they get to Ba Sing Se, the Earth City, you feel a sense of resolution and accomplishment when they do, even though they haven't overcome a personal obstacle, they haven't overcome a major plot point, they haven't overcome a villain, but you are invested in this journey, and therefore you have a destination point. It feels satisfying. And She-Ra doesn't have that. All of its Resolutions, all of its payoffs are very concrete. You don't have as much of an abstract viewer focus feeling. There are moments where they tell the viewer this is the part where you feel a victory. Not a bad thing, but just one of the little subtle things that makes Avatar: The Last Airbender so fucking good. So what does that have to do with Ticket to Ride games? So one of the big differences between Ticket to Ride and Catan is that a lot of progress in Catan is lateral. Here's what I mean by that. Well, first of all, one of the things that Dave Howell, I believe, talks about in his section is the idea of decelerating point gain. You know, Catan, you're trying to get to 10 points. And you start with 2 settlements, so you start with 2 points. And the next couple points are easy to get. And as the board gets more crowded, there's other objectives, it becomes harder to get points. So it's hard to get to 10 points, but relatively easy to get to 4 or 5. And that's a good thing overall. But it's also frustrating, especially for people like me. A couple things I find frustrating about it. So I meant, one, I feel like Catan has a lot of lateral progress. You are working towards ideas and goals, but you are doing so by often accumulating resources you don't want. You are trying to get to 4 sheep so you can trade them for a wood, because you don't need sheep and you do need wood. Once you have that wood, you haven't achieved anything. You've done a piece, and hopefully you'll be able to use that piece to do another thing. And then by the time you've been doing that, if someone else did a thing, beat you to it, then you have to pivot, but there's no interim payoff. You might be able to go a different direction to get somewhere almost as good, but you were building towards something and that something got quashed. And it doesn't feel like you can make a new strategy. You just have to make the best of a bad situation. Second, the acquisition of these resources is based on a die roll. And some of you may know, I fucking hate die rolls in games, especially when you're rolling a very few dice. I played Machi Koro once, where you roll 1 or 2 dice to determine which of your cards that you have built trigger. And it is infuriating. Like, when you see someone roll a 9 like 3 times in a row when you haven't seen a single 8, and you just hated it, loathed that game. Catan's not nearly as bad. But that's the thing, your fate is determined by a die roll, so you don't feel like you can actively work towards that goal. The big selling point of Catan, I think the reason it's so popular, and the reason that people don't have the same issue with me, is the player interaction. The card trading mechanic is key to Catan functioning, because otherwise it would be a grind. Otherwise it'd be really similar to Ticket to Ride, except you have less control of your destiny and more of these lateral moves. So again, remember, lateral move is just trade 4 sheep for a wood. And it's more exciting when you can trade a player 3 sheep for a wood, or 3 sheep for 2 wood, and everyone goes home happy. Ticket to Ride, you don't have lateral progress. You have a number of colors. There's cards on the board that you can pick from, or you can pick from the deck. So if there are cards on the board that you want, you can pick them. If there's no colors that you want, you can draw from the deck. So you were always choosing your destiny. There are multiple routes. Catan, if you get blocked off at a spot, you are blocked off at that spot because they put a settlement there and that shit's taken. Maybe you can go find a new spot, but you're back to square 1, or at least back to square 3. Ticket to Ride, there are many routes to each city. Someone puts down the exact thing that you wanted, they put down a blue 3 train on a spot. You're like, well shit, I was planning towards that, but I have these blue cards still. Let me take this other blue line that might be more points, or will let me go around. You can pivot. Ticket to Ride lets you build progress, It lets you build progress in multiple directions. There's no blue available, but you're going to need green eventually. Let me grab these greens while I have them. It lets you pivot. So unblock that, I can go around, I'll be able to make it work. It throws a twist at you. It doesn't throw a wrench at you, it throws a twist at you. It's a good distinction. And Ticket to Ride, you have these destination cards, and you pick them at the start of the game, and you can pick more. And if you don't complete them, you lose points. But that's on you. A side note, I think it's telling that a lot of Euro games keep the score entirely or partially hidden until the end of the game. Ticket to Ride, you get points during the game, but then you score your gold cards at the end of the game. And I think that's important to Dave Howell's points about believing that you can win or lose right until the end of the game, because it keeps it engaged and keeps it interesting. And that's one of the reasons I don't quite like Twilight Imperium. This is a 12-hour game where by like hour 6, you can tell you're not going to win. Kind of like Risk, except for even more thinking. And less easy to suicide yourself into another group. But TA has a lot of other things to it. I'm just not the biggest fan, but I'm not trying to say it's a bad game. It's just, it has a tendency to feel that way. And when I played Burning Suns, which is another space combat game, there's more back and forth of taking planets, giving up planets. There's more of a raiding mechanic and a lot more catch-up mechanics than Twilight Imperium, so I overall liked it better. But that's a discussion for another time. Yeah, so that's the core of Ticket to Ride for me, is that you can constantly build progress. Even if another player impedes you, it's a twist, not a wrench, not a reversal. You can pivot. In Catan, your fate is more random. You make more lateral moves that are not directly towards progress. And the player interaction, it's a more social game, which is like whatever. So where am I going with this? Well, I mentioned earlier that I like co-op games. One co-op game that I played a lot when I was younger, like, not really high school, I think probably during college, I would say. It's hard to pinpoint, I don't quite remember, is Arkham Horror. So in Arkham Horror, you have locations, and the Great Old Ones will open gates, and monsters will come from these gates. And your goal is to seal the gates. So the game is constantly challenging you by opening new gates, and you can either close them, or you can seal them permanently. I don't think this is in the original, but the expansions introduce an idea called a gate burst, where there's certain cards that if they try to open a gate where you sealed it, it will break your seal. This is a difficulty increaser. And it's a mechanic I'm not fond of, because it has that feeling of reversal of progress. I think it works pretty well from Arkham Horror, because it's meant to be a hard game. It's meant to have that Cthulhian mythos horror feeling of you're almost doomed. But I don't know, in some ways it's like if you're playing Pandemic, where you have to eradicate diseases, and you eradicate a disease, and then it comes back. I mean, Pandemic sometimes feels like that, where you clear out an area and you don't quite eradicate the disease, and then it comes back and you're like... So maybe Pandemic does feel like that sometimes. I also don't like Pandemic very much. Sue me. That one's a different video though. So I'm not a fan of the gate burst mechanic, because sealing is a progress point, and you have taken the player's progress and said this progress is cancelled. I'm not that okay with that. There's another old one. There's an specific old one. I forget if this happens during the game or end of game. I think it's during the game, where the old one actually destroys locations. And if too many locations get destroyed, the game ends. And again, I don't remember if this is during game or post game or both. Or like during the main part of the game versus the final battle or whatever. But this is cool to me, because a location destroyed, let's say a location gets destroyed where you had a gate sealed, In some ways, that feels bad. It just undid player progress. The player doesn't have to reseal it, and it's now a twist. The player is now not able to do a thing. Pivot. Players can pivot. The players don't necessarily have to go back and close the gate or seal the gate again. Yeah, repeated effort is part of the Arkham Horror experience. I get it. I'm just saying it's a mechanic I'm not fond of. So now let's go into co-op. I'm designing not like a Chthonian horror, but a similarly cosmic horror co-op game. And it's going to have a deck of event cards that affect the player's progress. And I want to introduce some frustration, as per Mike Seliger's, recommendations on keeping a player engaged. I want the players to feel like they could win or could lose at any time. And I want to keep them on their toes. I have a couple of mechanics for this, of decelerator mechanics making the game harder and easier at various points. But what I want every game to have is 1 or 2 complete wrenches. Too often, and the players will get frustrated. But I want there to be a chance in the game that the players get a severe twist. That not going to lose progress, but they've been going in this direction, and now they need to change their trajectory and go this way instead of going this way. That's the goal. Because I want to always make sure that the player feels like they're maintaining progress. I don't ever want to make them feel like they're going backwards. And there have to be metrics for progress. So what can those be? One aspect I'm exploring with this game is that it's a fixed number of turns. They have X number of rounds to survive before a final battle. That's another thing about Arkham Horror. Arkham Horror has a soft increase. There's like the terror track, which certain things make it go up. And there's the doom track, which makes certain things go up. And if I recall correctly, once the doom counter is filled, then there's the final boss, and it's like the final boss is your last chance. Whenever I played it, if you beat the game by sealing enough gates, we would just usually do the final battle anyway, because the final battle is exciting. You don't want to win the game by saying you locked the door. You want to say, I punched Cthulhu in the face. So we usually would do the final battle even if we already won the game. So those are 2 things that will increase over time, doom counter and terror track, but they increase when certain things happen, not necessarily every turn. I want this to be kind of a last stand, almost tower defensive thing, where you're pushing back and getting stronger and fighting, and then finally you've survived long enough that the final boss gets pissed off and goes in themselves, like is done sending forward lackeys, and it's a final showdown, and you always get the final showdown. And one of the reasons I want it to be a more or less fixed clock is that the players feel like they're making progress. There's always something going forward. And if the players ever do something really well, hit certain landmarks, beat certain mini-bosses, or clear the board of monsters, the game will actually advance the track extra. The players will get a reward, but their time towards endgame is lowered. And in that way, I can sort of control player progression and keep those progress points consistent. So that's one thing I'm exploring. And we're at about 20 minutes. I hope this isn't too rambly, but you're watching one of my videos. I want to talk about some other games and how they deal with progress frustration. And also kind of that deferred reward idea that you see a lot in Euro games. So Viticulture, which I've played once on this channel, is interesting because even though there's no points, there's only a tiny bit of points that are assigned at the very end of the game, it does have kind of an exponential growth. Actually, this will be better. Whatever. Exponential growth, where in the beginning of the game you get very few points. You just setting the groundwork, planting vines, getting grapes, making grapes into wine, collecting wine orders, and then towards the last couple turns, you're like, oh, I have this engine going. boom, boom, boom. That's really satisfying. It's a great game as far as engine building goes. And that's really cool because you can have progress points. You can see that you are making progress. Nothing really sets you behind. Your vines don't get killed. There's very little ways that the other players can screw you. And you can set your own goals. You can make better wines, more wines, focus on upgrading this, focus on upgrading that. It gives you a lot of choice in that. I also have played Race for the Galaxy on this channel. So Race for the Galaxy is you're trying to get victory points through trading resources, and you're trying to settle planets and build developments. And you build things by discarding cards from your hand. So if you have a card that costs 5, you have to discard 5 other cards. And the first time I played this game, it drove me nuts because it always felt like I couldn't make progress. You have a hand of 10 cards, and your best cards cost 6. You can't say, oh, I have card A, B, and C that go well together, let me focus on playing them. You have to go, I have A, B, and C, I'm going to play A because I can, and it gives me the best short-term thing. As I've gotten better, I've learned, being like, okay, I'll keep A, work towards C, disregard B, and then discard anything else that doesn't fit into that strategy. It's not my favorite game, but I've played like 300 games of it just because it's quick and online. I can play it on the computer, and I do feel meta-wise I'm making progress and getting better at the game. But again, that's an engine building game. And the games that I love of it are when they're satisfying, you get synergies, and you can actually play them. But the game's core mechanic of trading discarding cards to play cards, can be so maddening if you don't draw synergistic cards, or if you draw expensive synergistic cards, because it's so hard, especially because the AI is fucking amazing in it. It's so hard to get ahead. And long-term strategy is something that you force, right? You can see progress in terms you made planets, you got points, but short-term victories in the game are fleeting and not in every game I play, which is fine, but I do find it an interesting thing of that feeling of lateral momentum where you've played a card and you don't have synergies with that card yet, and you don't have any more cards in your hands. Now you need to build time and get more cards just so you can try to find something that synergizes. Oh, I spent 3 cards to get +1 military, so now I can build military cards if I draw them. So let me go try to draw military cards. I didn't draw any. Well, now I'm fucked. So that's one of the things I like about Carcassonne, is that you have the incremental progress throughout the game, and then you count the farmers at the end. Again, Carcassonne, my fondness for it has kind of come and gone over time. I don't know if Mike Selenk is watching this. I know he watched one of my previous ones, or at least a little bit. But Betrayal in the House of the Hill handles progress interestingly by kind of going, fuck you. Like, the progress is your progress towards doom. You're exploring this house, knowing that you're going to get omens. Omens will trigger the endgame condition. You get items that might make you stronger, might make you weaker. But the game kind of goes, your progress is that you're progressing towards the endgame, which will happen, and then stuff will happen. He's described it himself as kind of a mess of mechanics, and it really is. But it's an addicting mess of mechanics because you don't know what's going to happen. It's like you choose your own adventure that you're playing with a 5-year-old, and the 5-year-old has the book, and they're like, do this or do this, and then you do something and it goes, okay, now the walls eat you. And you're like, is that what the book says? The book says the walls eat me? And they're like, yeah. It just feels like you're playing with a 5-year-old who's making stuff up as they go along, and that's fun. I love the game. I'm super excited to try the Legacy mode. Let me think of some other games. So, let me think. Seven Wonders is an interesting game. So in Seven Wonders, you have a wonder of the world that has 3 stages that you can build. And you can also get military cards, and if you have more than the other players, you get points. And you can also get science cards, where if you build a lot of them, you get points. And you can also have blue cards, which just get you points. And you can have yellow cards, which just get you money, but maybe they'll get you points at the end of the game, depending. So there's like, you actually score on like a little pad, and it's like 7 different sections. And the way you play that is you have 7 cards, you pick one, everyone picks one, they reveal them simultaneously, and you pass the other 6 cards. Which means that often, if it's a big enough game, you're not going to see those cards again. So each round you're making a choice, but you have to make sure you have the resources for that choice. But you're always making progress, you're always playing cards. Even if it's just selling a card to get money, so you can make the next decision. You can make longer term strategies. Worst case scenario, you can try to make progress on finishing your wonder. At the end of the game, maybe it's decided by someone getting a really big point card at the last minute. But in general, you have no idea who's winning, because there's like 6 different ways to track victory, and a lot of points are assigned in the final round. But you're always making progress. You have a visual track of things, you're accumulating cards, and you're never... Sometimes you discard a card for gold, but you're almost never not accumulating something. You're almost always playing a card. At the end of the game, you are going to have... let's see, there's 7... You'll end up playing 6. So at the end of the game, you'll have like 18 cards in front of you. You have done something. That's really cool. Let me just check it out. Yeah, just kind of looking at my collection real quick. Kingdom Builder, which I've been playing recently. You have these abstract goals that are counted at the end of the game. And it's literally a building game. Dominion, the deck builder, you're constantly building up your deck. And that's one of the reasons that curses cards in the game that fill up your hand and do nothing are sometimes really unpopular. Because they make you step back. They force a reverse, they lower your points, they lower your ability to do things, whereas the fun in Dominion is building a deck that does lots of things. Curses clog your deck, prevent you from doing things. It's one of the reasons I almost never play with attack cards in Dominion, because all of them lower the other player's ability to do things. One of my favorites is the Spy. Spy, when you play it, you draw a card, and you'll get to play another card. Each player, including yourself, reveals the top card of their deck. You get to decide if they put it back on top or discard it. So you get to actively affect the player's next turn. If they had a good card, you've gotten rid of their good card. However, you haven't taken their 5 cards and reduced them to 3 like some other attacks. You haven't made their deck permanently worse. You haven't set them backwards. You have just tried to put them on a twist. And again, I'm pretty trying to say twists are better than wrenches, in general. Especially any of the Dominion attack cards that cause you to lose cards from your deck. Maddening. There's a card Thief, which, if I recall correctly, they reveal the top 2 cards of their library, their deck, and if one of them is a treasure, you can take it. If I recall, that's what the card does, but it's been a long time since I've actually played Dominion, which is very sad. But back when Dominion Online was actually good, and by that I mean the free version that was really fast-paced, that got taken down when the official version came out, and the official version is a piece of shit. Anyway, stats are tracked. Thief is one of the lowest victory percent cards in the game. It's something like 37%. Like, buying it was actively bad towards you winning the game. And it also felt bad. But people would play it sometimes because they thought, hey, if I'm taking something from the opponent, it must be helping me. It's a terrible card. I like that Dominion has terrible cards, but it's a terrible card. I'm trying to think of like a classic game I can talk about the people that may have actually played. Let's talk about Monopoly. Monopoly comes up a couple times in Kobold's Guide to Game Design, which I swear is the last time I'm going to show that book that I have no stake in this video. Monopoly does have good progress points. You are building things, you get to place properties, and it also has a lot of reversals that you're out of your control. You landed on someone's place, you don't have money, now you can't build your thing. You didn't land on the thing, go fuck yourself. The decision points in the game are out of your control, and things are wrenches, not twists. So even if you are indeed making progress, generally speaking, if you're playing the game, and it's very well defined progress, placing things, acquiring money to place things, the forms of consequence are very reversal based. Let's compare that to a game like let's go with Scrabble, classic word game. Your fate is defined partially by the tiles, but at the end of the day there is a best play that you could make that you could figure out. Your score doesn't go down, except for the very last turn, but your score generally doesn't go down in Scrabble, it only goes up. And one thing I love about playing Words with Friends is that there's a little blue icon that tells you what your best word would have been. And if you play the highest point value word that you could play, that icon doesn't light up. Sometimes I won't click that icon, but I'll see, oh, that lit up. That means I could have played a better word. I try to think about what that better word could have been. Because in a meta sense, that means I'm making progress as a player. That makes me think about my decisions in a way that gives me progress on a greater scale. Which is, I think, an interesting thing to talk about in a different video. Net progress in games as you play them, which is also a potential reason that you play a game that you know you've lost or that you know you've won. Know you've lost happens to me a lot in Race for the Galaxy, but that's a topic for another video. So obviously this was rambly because all my videos are rambly, and hopefully I did an okay job of explaining the games that I brought up, at least in very condensed form. There's countless others I could do. But at the end of the day, I think one thing to consider frustration-wise with games is to always make there be increments of progress. Try to keep it forward and not lateral. Try to make hindrances to that progress things that force you to pivot and not things that stop you or reverse your progress. And in cooperative games, you can get away with more, but try to keep the number of fuck you twists to a minimum. And again, try to make them pivots. Try to make the players play differently and not redo actions. Even if they could redo them more easily this time, try not to make them retread the same ground. I hope this video was at least a little bit interesting. Please let me know if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, anything full of shit. And hope you enjoyed. So until next time, Double Bite out.